My husband declared, enough is enough. His sister revealed the shocking truth he must discover. Sarah stood quietly in front of the stove, the chaos of the day simmering down, but the weight of their life hanging thick in the air. The sound of Jake's heavy boots echoed as he entered their small home, the smell of grease and worn-out machinery trailing behind him. She could see it in his eyes, the desperation, the exhaustion. Enough is enough, he had yelled at the dinner table only a few nights prior, his voice a blend of anger and sorrow that sent a jolt through her. But as she glimpsed his weary face now, she couldn't help but wonder what that meant for them. Would he quit? Would they lose everything? Jake was suffocating under the dullness of his factory job, a place that offered no promise, and Sarah felt the pressure building. Each unpaid bill, each clanging factory bell echoed louder in her mind, each time a reminder of their struggles hung like a dark cloud over their home. She reached for the spatula, trying to gather her breath, and caught herself wrestling a mix of determination and fear about what came next. Just then, Molly entered with the kind of vitality that felt like a slap to their reality. Jake's sister had a spark that was palpable. She was flourishing in a world of finance, a realm where numbers danced to her tune. As Molly poured coffee into their chipped mugs, a smirk played on her lips, but tension simmered just beneath the surface. Both Sarah and Jake exchanged uncertain glances, a silent question swirling between them. Would this chaotic whirlwind disrupt their fragile balance? "Did you hear?" Molly began, her voice rich with excitement. "Mom and Dad passed down something you had no idea about." It was the mention of family legacy that closed around them like a vice. Sarah's heart tightened. What didn't Jake know? Her fingers trembled against the mug as she listened, remembering tales of their parents' sacrifice, dreams crushed beneath the weight of debts. Jake was already questioning his path, his mind racing through shadows of responsibility and nostalgia. As the conversation deepened, Jake's face twisted in a pit of confusion. On one hand, there stood a legacy he had never considered, and on the other, his own desires, bright yet clouded with self-doubt. "You could revitalize it, Jake." Molly's encouragement hung in the air, sweet yet suffocating, pulling at the edges of his soul. The longer she spoke, the more Sarah felt the straining threads of their life together unraveling, nurturing both hope for Jake's potential and fear of hanging on to something he never truly wanted. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As if a storm were brewing, the emotional tension thickened. Jake hesitated, battling between the fear of embracing an expectation he never asked for and the possibility of growth. Should he dive into a role that carried family history, or carve out his own identity, free from the legacy? With each tick of the clock, the air grew heavier, the weight of the inherited dreams spilling over the confines of the kitchen. Just then, Molly leaned in, her expression shifting. "You need to know something about Dad's promise," she started, her tone layered with urgency. The words hung in the space between them, sharp and echoing, a revelation threatening to explode the delicate truce of their evening. Jake's entire being fermenting with uncertainty as Sarah gripped his hand, feeling the tremors radiate between them, ready to face whatever truth lay ahead. A discovery that could redefine everything they thought they knew about family, duty, and ambition. Jake's heart raced, the pulse of uncertainty drumming louder with every word Molly uttered. Dad's promise was about more than just legacy. It was about freedom, she continued, the weight of her statement sinking into the walls of the small kitchen, wrapping itself around Jake's consciousness like an iron chain. He blinked, searching her face for clarity amidst the swirling confusion. "What do you mean?" His voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from the emotional tempest tearing through him. Did freedom even exist in the heaviness of expectation? The idea sparked a forbidden ember of curiosity in Jake, igniting a flicker of hope that could either guide him or consume him whole. Molly's smirk faded, replaced by an earnestness that held a gravity he had never seen in her before. Dad often said a promise comes at a debt, one that binds you if you let it. As she spoke, a silent war began within Jake, echoing his every doubt and fear. He was not just wrestling with his own aspirations. He was grappling with a history that loomed over him like a ghost, one that he couldn't silhouette without losing a piece of himself in the process. "I can't just walk away, can I?" Jake finally said, his voice reflecting the turmoil churning within. He felt trapped, bound by an invisible tether to both his parents' dreams and his own burgeoning desires. The thought of disappointing anyone felt like a crime he didn't want to commit. Yet the allure of a life unshackled tugged relentlessly at his heart. Sarah watched him closely, her heart split between empathy for his turmoil and anxiety over their future. She saw the inner battle playing out in Jake's facial expressions, each flicker of hope shadowed by despair. It was an unspoken conflict that had shaped their lives thus far, and in that moment she grasped the depths of his struggle, a reflection of her own unvoiced fears and ambitions. Molly, perceiving the shifting dynamics, placed her hands firmly on the table. "Look, Jake, you have skills, potential you're not even tapping into. If Dad had his way, he wouldn't want you trapped in that factory forever. He'd want you to forge your own path." Her voice was laced with conviction, willing him to see beyond the blurred lens of legacy. Those words struck Jake with an urgency that reverberated in his core. The question surfaced again. Who was he underneath the weight of familial expectations? He had always been the dutiful son, a cog in a machine that left him no room to breathe. Thinking about it felt like trying to swim upstream in a current that threatened to drown him. Yet there was something stirring within, an uncharted desire urging him to explore ambition beyond the looming shadows of his past. The possibility that he could shape his own identity, that he could create a meaningful legacy of his choosing, rippled through him. But what did that path entail? What if he failed? The tight coils of anxiety tightened once again, threatening to smother those burgeoning aspirations. "You need to decide what freedom means to you," Molly said softly, cutting through his spiraling thoughts. The gravity of her statement lingered in the air, solidifying the challenge before him. As they sat surrounded by the gesturing shadows of their own fears and hopes, Jake felt the tumult of choice press down. Could he muster the courage to confront the expectations placed upon him, the lingering shadows of a family legacy? Did he dare? Without realizing it, he was on the precipice of a startling realization. His decisions, whether to embrace or reject his family's legacy, could redefine everything. With the warm sunlight creeping through the window, illuminating the crumpled bills on the counter, the kernel of an idea blossomed in his mind. Just as he felt his heart begin to stabilize, an unsettling thought intruded. What if there was more to uncover about his father's promise and the family legacy? The dark undertow of doubt whispered to him yet again. As the weight of potential pressed against him, Jake leaned back in his chair, steeling his resolve. One thing was certain. He could no longer afford to stand idle in the shadows. The conversation had released a hatch, a labyrinth of choices he now needed to navigate, and with Molly's revelations igniting his imagination, the prospect of transformation loomed larger. Just then, a piercing thought shot through him, a visceral question that hung heavy in the air. Was he ready to confront the legacy that had shaped him, and was he prepared for the consequences that might arise when he stepped into the light? The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a soft glow that made the dust motes dance in the air. Jake sat in silence, the echoes of his sister's words reverberating in his mind, igniting an intensity he had never felt before. He had been adrift in a sea of obligations, but now, for the first time, he could see the shore, his own path beckoning him. He pushed his chair back and stood, the decision swirling in his thoughts. Could he really confront his family's legacy head-on? What form would that confrontation take? He envisioned the factory, a place that had become synonymous with his identity, yet felt increasingly like a prison. As he prepared to leave, he felt the knot in his stomach tighten, a mix of fear and exhilaration. Stepping out into the brisk morning air, Jake took a moment to breathe deeply. The weight of expectation loomed, but he could no longer ignore the burgeoning desire for something more. Conversations about freedom had awakened something inside him, an ember yearning for oxygen. It felt reckless, but perhaps that was what he needed. A reckoning with the past that had shaped him, and an examination of the person he strived to become. Jake's first stop was the library, a sanctuary where he could delve into the history of his family and their legacy. He had spent years avoiding the shadows of his father's influence, but now he was determined to learn about the promise that had been woven into the fabric of his existence. As he stepped through the heavy wooden doors, he felt a surge of anticipation. Finding his voice amongst the forgotten pages was essential. The legacy was long steeped in family pressures, but perhaps it could also be reinvented. Hours slipped away as he scoured through dusty books and family letters, tracking the lineage that had shaped him. Each revelation came with a sharpening clarity, threads of ambition intertwined with sacrifice. He paused, his heart racing as he discovered his father's hidden passions. Artistry in woodworking, a side he had never known. Why hadn't his father pursued it fully? Was the life he had lived out of obligation, just like Jake was doing now? As more layers peeled away, Jake felt the growing chasm between who he was and who he wanted to be widen, drawing him closer to the edge of his old life. What would it take to step beyond the shadows? Should he confront his father's choices and demand answers? Or would that simply deepen the bonds of expectation he sought to escape? He left the library with a notebook filled with revelations, yet the uncertainty gnawed at him. Deep inside, another question surfaced. If he thundered into a confrontation with his family's legacy, what could be the cost? Relationships were at stake, yet so was the core of his own identity. The sun dipped low in the sky as he walked home, bathing the world in orange hues. Each step felt more deliberate, as if he were paving his own way forward, wrestling with each fractal of doubt. The promise of freedom lay tantalizingly close, yet just out of reach. Cocooned in the narrative he was ready to rewrite. Jake opened the door, ready to share his findings with Sarah and Molly, ready to confront those deep, familial bonds that both trapped and connected them. But as he stepped inside, he noticed their worried faces, their whispers cutting through the air like shards of glass. An unspoken tension hung between them, and as he sensed the gravity in their silence, the question throbbed in his mind. What awaited him here, and would it sway the very course he had begun to chart? Could this moment shatter the fragile foundation of their shared family legacy, or would it reinforce the shackles he was desperate to escape? The reality of those choices pressed down, and a new resolve forged itself within him. In that kitchen filled with unease, Jake felt the stakes rise. This was no longer just about him. This was the moment he would test his newfound understanding against their expectations. "Let's talk," he said, the weight of his decision anchoring him as anticipation surged within, brisk and icy like the first breath of winter. Jake's words hung in the air, a fragile thread connecting his hesitation to the uncertain tension in the room. Sarah's eyes widened, and he could feel Molly's gaze darting between him and their older sister, the weight of his intentions thickening the atmosphere. He had taken the first step into uncharted territory, ready to forge a new understanding of his family's legacy, yet the uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud overhead. "What's going on?" he pressed, compelled to break the silence. "You both look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah hesitated, the silence chewing at him like a relentless predator. Finally she spoke, her voice a shaky whisper. "Jake, we need to talk about Dad." At her words, the knot in his stomach twisted again, but he made himself stand steady. What about him? Molly glanced at Sarah, as if seeking permission. It's about the factory, she began, a tremor in her voice. There's something you should know, something you didn't hear growing up. The implications of her words washed over him like icy water, shocking and invigorating. He had been steeling himself to confront his father's legacy, but now the ground felt even more precarious beneath his feet. What do you mean? Dad didn't just run the factory because he had to. He was forced into it, Molly explained, her eyes glimmering with unshed tears. After Mom died, he felt like it was the only way to keep us together, to uphold what the family built. But underneath, he was an artist. He never wanted to be that man, Jake. He just wanted to create. Each word struck him like a hammer, demanding his attention. Was it true? Had his father masked his true desires under the weight of obligation, creating a world defined by duty alone? What are you saying? He hid that from me. The betrayal stung. If he wanted to be an artist, why didn't he just tell me? He thought he was protecting you, Sarah interjected, her voice gaining strength. He thought if you got a taste of his failures, you'd choose a safer path. So he never showed you his work. All you knew was the factory, labor, time cards, endless production schedules. As realization washed over him, an avalanche of questions surfaced. Could it be that his father's struggles mirrored his own? Had he, too, been dancing on a knife's edge, caught between obligation and desire? The enormity of this revelation sparked something primal within him. I don't want to be caught in that trap, Jake said, his tone firm. But I need to confront him. I can't live in the shadows of his choices anymore. His heart raced. This was the ignition he needed. Be careful, Sarah cautioned, her expression grave. You risk everything during this conversation. It could change the dynamic of our family forever. The stakes had just escalated, a game of chess played under the cloak of family loyalty. He couldn't turn back now. If his father had forfeited his freedom, Jake was determined to reclaim his life, no matter the cost. A surge of determination struck him as he came to a decision. I won't shy away. I need to meet him. I have to find out how deep this goes, whether satisfaction lies in truth or in the careless illusions of legacy. The room quieted as he felt the thunder of resolve growing bolder. This confrontation would shatter the entrenched structures of their family's past, a necessary collision of truths that would either bind them closer or reveal the fractures running beneath. Jake! Sarah whispered, uncertainty drifting between them. I'll be fine, he assured her, though self-doubt hung at the edges of his resolve. He needed to confront his father's choices, confront the legacy that loomed over him, looming larger than ever with the potential to redefine his very existence. As he turned to leave, the kitchen door clicked shut behind him. The night whispered secrets, and Jake stepped into the unknown, ready for a reckoning that loomed over him like an unfinished canvas, waiting for the brush of truth. But with each step towards certainty, another fear loomed. Would the truths he uncovered drive his family apart, or bind them together in ways they had never considered? The moment of confrontation was drawing nearer, and with it, the possibility of clarity or chaos. Jake's heart pounded as he made his way to the factory, its looming structure a reminder of his father's burdens and dreams. With each step, the tension coiled tighter within him. The memories of childhood echoed, the sound of machines blending into the backdrop of a life meticulously built through sacrifice. But now, he felt the weight of secrets pressing down on him, his father's untold story awaiting revelation. Entering through the familiar doors, he was flooded with memories. The air carried the familiar scent of metal and lubricant, a stark contrast to the swirling doubts in his mind. He paused, taking in the machinery that had become synonymous with his upbringing. The rhythmic clanking was deafening, but to Jake, it was merely a soundtrack to a life he was desperate to understand. Drawing a deep breath, he navigated the factory floor. There was a stark difference between his youthful enthusiasm and the critical eye he now wielded. He observed the employees, machines whirring and humming around them, each person traversing their paths drawn by the demands of productivity. No longer was he blinded by nostalgia. He began to see each task as a piece of a greater puzzle, one that confounded him. "Jake!" a voice broke through his thoughts. Greg, an older employee and family friend, approached him, wiping grease from his hands. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jake forced a smile, though the weight of his intentions hung heavy on him. "Just trying to piece things together. Your dad's run this place like clockwork. You should see the way he handles things. Takes after your grandfather." There was a glimmer of pride in Greg's eyes that pierced through Jake's conflicted feelings. "Yeah, but at what cost?" he asked, unable to hold back the words. The bitterness tinged his throat, a mixture of anger and empathy. Greg's brow furrowed, concern replacing the camaraderie. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for a moment before he rushed forward. "I think Dad has hidden who he really is from all of us. I'm trying to understand that, Greg. To separate the man from the legacy." Greg studied him, the usual warmth flickering off. "You know that family business, this place. It's not just about the factory. It's about your dad's heart, too. Don't lose sight of that." The sincerity in Greg's words stung. Jake's resolve was both bolstered and troubled. Could he press forward with the confrontation, knowing it might shatter not just his father's world, but also the sense of belonging that this place provided him? With renewed determination, Jake made his way toward his father's office, his palms moist against the cool steel of the door handle. In the vast silence of the adjoining room, he stilled himself, the memories of warmth and laughter mingling with the growing storm within him. As he stepped inside, the sight of his father hunched over desk, cluttered with papers, sent a cascade of emotions ripping through Jake. The man who had sacrificed so much, yet had lost a part of himself in the process. Could he truly confront this shadow of obligation without being consumed by it himself? "Dad," he began, his voice steady but unsteady inside. "We need to talk." His father glanced up, confusion etched on his face, and for a fleeting moment, Jake saw the cracks, the vulnerability that his father had buried beneath layers of duty. The tension crackled as his father slowly sat back, the weight of anticipation settling between them. Would their conversation be a reckoning or a disaster? "Jake," his father said at last, voice even but heavy with implications. "What is it?" But deep down, Jake knew this was just the prelude to an explosion of truths, long buried. His heart raced as he prepared to unveil the complicated tapestry of fear and longing that had governed their lives. There was no turning back now. The moment had arrived for him to discover not just his father's truth, but how it intertwined with his own burgeoning identity. The words were at the tip of his tongue, yet an instinctual fear clawed at him. What if the truths uncovered were too great to bear? With resolve, he pushed forward, ready to confront the layers of legacy left between them. "It's time we discuss your past, Dad. I need to know who you really are." As the silence thickened, Jake realized this was just the beginning. The deeper they delved, the more revelation loomed ahead. An intricate dance of truth that had the potential to redefine not just their relationship, but Jake himself. Could he emerge from this revelation empowered, or would it irrevocably entangle him in the complexities of their family legacy? The silence hung heavily in the air, a tension palpable enough to slice through. Jake watched as his father's expression shifted from confusion to something resembling apprehension. It was in that moment, staring at the lines etched into his father's face, that Jake recognized the struggle of a man who had both shaped and concealed elements of his very identity. "Jake, his father began, but the words faltered, caught in a web of hesitation. "Please, Dad." Jake pressed, urgency tinging his voice. "I need to ask you about the sacrifices, the decisions you've made. Who are you behind all of this?" He gestured toward the office, filled with reminders of a legacy heavy with expectation. His father exhaled deeply, a sound laden with the weight of years lived under the shadow of duty. The very air between them shifted, as if they were on the precipice of something monumental. Jake felt time slow, the clock above the desk ticking away the seconds that felt like minutes. "Son," his father finally spoke, voice steady yet burdened. "I've always done what I believed was right for our family. For you. By hiding your true self?" The words spat out, raw, igniting a fire of frustration within him. "What about your dreams, your passions? All I've seen are chains." At that, the room fell silent again. Jake could see the struggle flickering in his father's eyes, a mix of regret, pain, and perhaps a splintering resolve. It stirred something in Jake, a fierce determination that didn't just seek answers, but also a broader understanding of responsibility and legacy. "You think I chose this? You don't understand, Jake. Running this factory, it was never just about machines. It was about survival." There was a quiver in his father's voice, a crack in the facade that Jake had never seen. "Survival? Survival leads to a life unlived," Jake shouted, his own emotions boiling over. "What good is all the success if you can't be yourself? Don't you see that this isn't just about you anymore? It's about me, who I'm supposed to become." His father winced at the accusation. The realization that his fortress had been breached was evident. Yet amid the storm of emotions swirling between them, Jake started to perceive a glimmer of something else: vulnerability. His father's life had been a tapestry of choices buried under a relentless drive for success. But those choices had been so carefully crafted that they had obscured the man beneath. "Tell me about Grandpa," Jake ventured, softening the ferocity of their exchange. "What was he like? I don't know anything about him, about how this all began." His father paused, the spark of memories igniting in his eyes. He, too, was a man of sacrifice. He left his own dreams behind to ensure we had a future. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Carry on that legacy without burdening you with the same sacrifices. A small wave of understanding washed over Jake. "But that's just it, Dad. You've burdened me with the weight of a legacy that may not even reflect what I want." Watching the internal struggle play out on his father's face sparked a profound realignment in Jake's understanding of his own life. He realized he was standing at a crossroads, not just for himself, but for the legacy of his family. It was a chance to rewrite the narrative they had both been trapped within. "Let's not repeat that cycle," he said, determination setting in. "I want to build my own path, but I need your truth to guide me." The air grew lighter as recognition passed between them, an understanding that had long been absent. This revelation could either build a bridge or serve as a final divide. The stakes were monumental, but Jake felt ready for the challenge, ready to redefine what their family legacy could mean. "Are you willing to let me in?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His father took a deep breath, the weight of hesitations washing over him. "If you're serious about this, then yes, it's time I showed you the truth." As they both leaned into the conversation, the promise of shared vulnerabilities and truths loomed ahead. But Jake felt a flicker of apprehension. They stood on the verge of unearthing long-hidden secrets. What other truths lay buried, waiting to surface in the light of their new understanding? And would those revelations ultimately unite them or unravel the very fabric of their family ties? The journey to uncover their intertwined fates was only just beginning, and neither could deny that the path would be fraught with challenges. As Jake leaned forward, the atmosphere thick with anticipation, his heart raced. He sensed this was a crucial moment of discovery, not just for him, but for his father as well. The honesty that had been absent for so long seemed to hang between them like an unspoken promise. Jake wasn't just seeking answers. He was forging a path for his own identity, sloughing off the layers that had been piled on by familial expectations. "Okay, Dad," he urged, breaking the tension. "Where do we begin? What was he like?" His father's brow furrowed, as if he were rummaging through a box of faded memories. "Your grandfather was a dreamer, Jake, full of ambition. But the world, it wore him down. The factory was his way of providing for us, of ensuring we never went hungry. He thought we would find fulfillment along the way, like he did. But in the end, I think he lost himself. Jake felt an electric jolt run through him. His grandfather had been a mirror, reflecting choices and dreams deferred. In that moment, he saw the generational weight shifting onto his own shoulders. What did he love? What did he want? He wanted to create, his father admitted, a hint of reverence slipping into his tone. He painted, wrote poetry, but those dreams faded into the background of responsibilities. He thought they were selfish. Selfish? Jake echoed, a raw edge to his voice. He needed to understand. The act of creating is part of being alive. Why didn't anyone encourage him? Why did you choose survival over passion? His father's face tightened. It's all I knew. I thought survival was the most responsible path. I must have thought that by sacrificing my own dreams, I could somehow lift the burden from you. The revelation struck Jake. It was the very dichotomy he was grappling with. He was poised between the relentless pendulum of safety and the whisper of creativity. So you've chosen to be someone you're not, thinking it would spare me. But look at what it has done. His father sighed deeply, shoulders sagging under the weight of burdens carried. In that moment, Jake recognized the heart of the matter. It was more than just familial expectation. It was love blended with fear. But fear could no longer dictate their choices. I don't want to silence my dreams or follow a path designed by someone else. I need to paint my own picture, Jake asserted, fueled by conviction. I won't let this lineage of hidden truths stifle my spirit or define who I am. Jake's father looked at him, a flicker of sorrow dancing in his eyes. But it's complicated, son. This business, the factory, it's my life. It's not easy to just walk away from it. The hate of the unknown can be terrifying. We can expose that discomfort together. This isn't just your burden anymore. It's our family legacy, and we owe it to ourselves to explore it, Jake insisted, his chest tightening with the weight of the realization. If you share your experiences, your unfiltered truth, maybe I can find the freedom to understand my own identity too. The air shifted again, a burgeoning sense of possibility taking root, even if fraught with apprehension. His father appeared to wrestle with conflicting emotions. The legacy was not just tangible assets and a factory, it was intricate, filled with stories none had dared to tell. Jake leaned in closer, sensing the tenderness behind the walls. You need to let go of your fear, Dad. Together, we can rebuild this legacy on transparency rather than ashes. Show me what is buried in the fabric of our history. Let me make my own choices, even if that means challenging what we've always known. In the silence that followed, a wall began to crack. Just then, Jake's phone buzzed on the desk, startling them both. He glanced at the screen. The name that flashed made his stomach churn. Noah, his childhood friend, but now an adversary. What did he want? Jake wondered aloud, heart racing with thoughts that spiraled into dread. At that moment, he realized that facing one truth might lead him to confront another. But would he be prepared for the revelations that could tear down more than just familial barriers? As the weight of the past began to shift, Jake stood on the threshold of unknown futures, teetering between the call of the factory and the unexpected truths lurking in his own life. The moment of reckoning was rapidly approaching, setting the stage for yet another confrontation that could irrevocably change everything he'd ever known. What if confronting the past only unveiled deeper conflicts entangled with the present? Jake's thoughts spun as he stared at the glowing screen. The name Noah evoked memories tinted with both nostalgia and unease. Once they had been inseparable, two boys sharing dreams of infinite potential. Now, Noah was another reminder of the pressures Jake felt creeping closer, an embodiment of expectations that suffocated his aspirations. The last conversation they had ended in sharp words and unanswered questions. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the device. With a deep breath, he chose to let it ring out. There was weight in the decision. It felt empowering to reject the call, a small but necessary act of reclaiming his narrative. He turned back to his father, who had been watching him while processing a storm of emotions. This may sound contradictory, but I think avoiding Noah and diving into my own uncertainties is more important right now, Jake said, determined to engage with the feelings bubbling beneath the surface. His father nodded slowly, the understanding dawning that Jake needed space to wrestle with his identity apart from external influences. You must face these things in your own time. Just remember, whatever you choose, I'm here. With that small reassurance, Jake felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. I think I need to set some priorities straight, to explore who I am without fear. Jake knew his next steps were precarious but essential. The duality of belonging to the factory legacy while yearning to carve his path weighed heavily on him. He needed to reconnect with his artistic spirit. He had buried it long enough, allowing it to gather dust in the recesses of his mind like an old canvas unpainted. What if I started painting again? He proposed, the idea escaping before he had fully formulated it. But the suggestion felt right, vibrating with the promise of untapped joy. His father's brow furrowed in confusion. What does that have to do with anything? The factory is what we've built. The factory is important, yes, but it's not everything. I need to reconnect with my own passions and maybe even understand your dreams too, Jake replied. It felt straightforward, though he knew the reality was layered. Each brushstroke could serve as an insight, a step toward healing and finding his authentic self. Jake's resolve deepened as he pictured canvases brimming with color and emotion, not just for him, but as a bridge to his father's hidden dreams. We both have so much to explore. If I start to paint, it might encourage you to reflect on your own unexpressed aspirations too. We could navigate this journey together. The silence wrapped around them, thick with potential and uncharted territory. Jake envisioned a world where creativity surged and burdens lifted rather than passed down like familial relics. But even the thought made his stomach flutter with uncertainty. "Do you think there is still time?" his father asked, the vulnerability in his voice cutting through Jake's bravado. Time has never been the issue. It was choice. Now we have a choice. To transform fear into expression, Jake articulated, adrenaline coursing through him. But I need to commit. I have to start tonight. Feeling a rush of exhilaration, Jake took a bold step toward the art supplies he'd abandoned long ago. Rummaging through old paints and brushes, he felt the stirrings of something long dormant. Would he finally allow himself to explore, to express pain and joy alike? And yet, as he prepared to dive into his long-neglected passion, Jake wondered if he was truly ready to confront Noah again and the conflict that could reshape the narrative of his life. An old wound beckoned on the horizon, and the thought chilled him. The time had come to face all aspects of his past and the connections that still tethered him to it. What revelations awaited him upon that confrontation? Would he emerge strengthened or further tangled in complications? Jake stood in the dim room, the weight of his past pulling at him as he surveyed the tarnished art supplies before him. Each can of paint and every brush carried a history, a fragmented representation of who he once aspired to be. In that moment, the notion of painting transformed from a simple hobby into a battleground for his burgeoning identity. He picked up a brush, noting the wear on its bristles. The tool felt foreign yet familiar, a paradox of his existence. As he dipped it into a pool of vibrant red, he could sense his heart pounding, a mixture of excitement and fear. Would this act be a catharsis or a confrontation with unhealed scars? Beginning with broad strokes, he allowed his instincts to guide him. Each movement felt euphoric, as if the act of creation demanded his full attention, pulling him away from the gnawing questions about Noah and the choices he had made. Yet, interspersed with the joy of painting, came sharp reminders of the unresolved tension between them. Could he truly express his artistic self while harboring such conflict? After an hour, Jake stepped back and surveyed the canvas. Swaths of red met the starkness of white, clashing in an exhilarating chaos that echoed his internal turmoil. He saw in the piece a reflection of the complexity of his emotions: fear, passion, doubt, and determination. But ideas of Noah crept in, demanding consideration. Should he reach out to him? Confront what lay hidden beneath their last tumultuous encounter? As the notion lingered, it began to fray his resolve. Would opening that door lead to healing or to further inner chaos? With gritted teeth, Jake wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. The spontaneous flow of creativity faltered as the specter of his old friend loomed larger. Noah had been both a source of inspiration and torment. Knowing he had left their relationship unresolved brought a bitter taste to his mouth. If he wanted to reclaim his identity, he had to face that painful chapter. Resuming his painting, Jake envisioned splashes of color blending and colliding, emotions merging in a way that resonated with his life. Messy, unpredictable, but ultimately beautiful. What exactly was he afraid of? Was it the fear of rejection, or the possibility that he hadn't changed as much as he thought? Each stroke on the canvas felt as decisive as a choice he had yet to make. He realized art was his safe space. It mirrored his struggles and aspirations. Perhaps confronting Noah wasn't just about resolving their conflict, but also a step toward understanding his own identity. What did he want from that conversation? Closure or reconciliation? As Jake wiped the brush across the canvas for the last time, he felt an unfamiliar sensation of empowerment wash over him. The act of creating had pushed him one step closer to clarity. The painting stood as a testament to the journey he had begun, not just toward rekindling his love for art, but toward mending fragmented ties with his past. The gravity of his decision loomed in the air, a complex mix of anxiety and exhilaration. He needed to reach out to Noah. But how? What would he say? Determination surged through him as he resolved to draft a message, a simple acknowledgement of their history and an invitation to meet. The thought felt monumental, a leap off a precipice into the unknown. With a deep breath, he pulled out his phone and exhaled slowly, focusing on the screen. He typed with rapt intensity. Would his message open old wounds or invite healing? Would it bridge the chasm between them or deepen it? The moment hung heavy in the air, his next move suspended between hope and fear. Where would this reconnection lead him, and what dormant truths lay in wait just beneath the surface? As his fingers hovered over the send button, Jake realized he stood not just at a technological crossroads, but at the intersection of his past and present. Ready or not, it was time to confront not only Noah, but the core of who he was becoming. With a final moment of hesitation, he pressed send, breath caught tight in his throat, awaiting the repercussions that would spring forth from that simple act. The moment Jake pressed send, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. The wave of uncertainty crashed, threatening to drown him in the aftermath of that singular action. He closed his eyes, envisioning the pathways ahead. There was no turning back. The decision had burst forth with an inevitability he could no longer resist. His fingers trembled as he glanced at the unfinished canvas behind him, each brush stroke pulsating with the emotions he couldn't help but channel into every image. The colors seemed to breathe, akin to his newfound resolve, a reflection of the complexities of his journey and the cathartic release that had momentarily filled his heart. Within moments, his phone vibrated, cutting through the heavy reverberations of silence. Jake's heart raced as he swiped the screen open. Noah's name flashed before him, and the simple "let's talk" stopped him cold. It was enough to renew the storm brewing in his chest. It was a mixture of fear and excitement that echoed in his thoughts. He took a moment to breathe, remembering the emotional turmoil that had defined their last encounter, words thrown like stones, silence filled with resentment. The lessons he'd discovered through painting weighed heavily in his mind. He longed for resolution, yet feared the confrontation could reopen old wounds, pushing an unresolved conflict deeper into the fabric of his being. But Jake felt the urgency of the moment. He was not just confronting Noah. He was embracing his own journey towards self-discovery, a journey that demanded honesty, both within and without. Maybe this will lead to clarity, he murmured to himself, the words grounding him. He texted back, when and where. Jake's mind raced with possibilities as they agreed to meet at their old coffee shop, a familiar space that had once hosted their shared laughter. He felt the weight of anticipation settle in, a mixture of anxiety and determination igniting the air around him. Driving to the cafe, Jake replayed the thoughts that filled his head, the images from his paintings rushing back, a vivid color palette of emotions waiting to be expressed. He knew he needed to communicate not just his pain, but also the very essence of who he was becoming. There was power in vulnerability, a strength he was only beginning to grasp. As he entered the quaint coffee shop, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around him like a warm blanket. Noah was already seated at their usual table, his posture relaxed yet guarded, as if anticipating a confrontation. Jake felt a swell of something deep within, an urge to leap forward, to embrace the old friendship that had fractured yet still lingered in the air around them. "Hey," Jake greeted, sliding into the chair across from Noah. The air between them was thick, filled with unspoken truths. "Hey," Noah replied, his demeanor betraying a hint of nervousness, unsure how to navigate the fraught waters they stood upon. Jake took a breath, his voice steady as he began. "I want to apologize for how we left things. I realize now that I was stuck, wrestling with my own expectations and fears about my future." Noah's eyes softened, tension easing slightly. "I was angry too. You have to understand. I felt abandoned. You seemed to drift into your art, and I thought we had lost each other." In that moment, Jake recognized the wounds that still festered. They were both prisoners of their expectations, how they modeled their lives after decisions, chasing dreams, yet tethered to the past. "I've changed, Noah," he whispered, the taste of vulnerability tingling on his tongue. "I've realized that I was suffocating under the pressures of my family's legacy. I no longer want to continue what they have imposed without knowing the truth." The weight of the unvoiced understanding hung heavily between them. Jake saw the same doubts reflected in Noah's eyes, a mirror of familiarity and shared ambiguity. "I'm trying to carve my own path, but it's hard when you feel the shadow of everyone else's choices on your back," Jake admitted. Noah nodded, seemingly processing the depth of Jake's transformation. "Believe me, I get it. I've been feeling the same way. Imposed identity is suffocating. It may feel comfortable, but it's not fulfilling." In that exchange, a tether, once severed, began to reweave itself. The realness of their shared struggles created a new form of understanding, a sanctuary where the storm of emotion could slowly unfurl into clarity. "Look, Jake," Noah began hesitantly, "I didn't want to come here today without understanding my own intentions. I need to shift too, to confront my own path, to rediscover who I am without comparison." The sincerity in Noah's tone struck a chord deep within Jake, solidifying the emotional bond that tied them. Both felt the oppressive chains of obligation, struggling against the currents that had so long defined them. "Then let's do it together, man. Let's confront what we've been avoiding. Let's help each other reclaim our passions," Jake proposed fervently. "I think our fears don't have to dictate the course of our friendship or dreams any longer." Noah smiled, a mix of relief and understanding flooding his expression. "I'd like that." The moment lingered between them like a resonance, a promise of potential transformation. They began to sketch out plans, not just for their artistic endeavors, but for each other's ongoing growth. Jake envisioned a project where they could blend their creativity and rethink past expectations together, a foundation where neither would need to compromise an integral part of who they were meant to be. As they dove into conversations filled with inspiration and anticipation, Jake felt solid confidence bloom in him. He had explored facets of his own identity, reconciled with the ghosts of the past, and stood now not just as Jake, but as the artist he had always yearned to become. A new path was emerging, one where freedom, expression, and honesty could coexist amidst the layers of legacy. With that, Jake left the coffee shop with a renewed sense of purpose thrumming in his veins. He realized that in cooperating to rewrite their stories, they had woven a thread that stitched back together not just their friendship, but the very identities they had been battling to reclaim. The emotional hurdles would remain, yet the foundation had shifted. They had taken the first step toward not just healing their interpersonal rift, but also towards personal triumph. Jake's heart satisfied with resolute joy. He had conquered fear, he had confronted the expectations of legacy, and he felt recognized in his competence to bloom amidst shadows. The journey wasn't over. Instead, it had just begun, an exciting landscape of discovery unfurling ahead. Jake emerged from the cafe, an artist ready to reshape his world on his own terms, looking forward with each step. It's time to embrace the future. Remember, as you reflect on Jake's journey, consider your path. What will you confront today to reclaim the parts of your own identity? Your narrative awaits. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Your voice is vital in fostering a community that embraces personal transformation.